And get going for today. So today's brown bag session is going to be featuring Dr. Elizabeth Flood-Grady. She's going to be talking about social media recruitment in particular, CTSI and the Recruitment Center, and she's going to have a whole lot of really useful information for us about a type of recruitment that is becoming increasingly common. So if you're ready, take it away.
Thanks, Lauren. I am going to talk myself through it as I share my screen and then make my presentation full screen. Awesome. Thanks for that introduction. So yeah, I'm Elizabeth Flood-Grady. I'm a visiting assistant professor in the STEM Translational Communication Center, and I currently manage our CTSI Recruitment Center at the University of Florida. So I am delighted to be here to talk about study recruitment and social media. That's a research interest, or an interest from both a service and a research perspective that if you had told me 5 or 6 years ago, I would be this deep in, I would have laughed in your face, but I've come to really love it. And I always get excited talking about this type of work. All right. Oh, just more information on me. You'll see my email a few times throughout. So if you do have questions after, feel free to email me. Also, if there are questions along the way, I just realized I will do my best to monitor the chat. And I also realize that I need to admit a few more people who are coming in. And so it will be recorded. So just so everybody knows that. But if you do have questions along the way, please feel free to submit them to the chat, like I said, and I'll do my best to monitor and respond to them as I go. So just a little bit about the overview of the presentation. Just to help contextualize a bit, I'll talk a little bit about our recruitment center, the types of services that we offer, one of our other main goals of advancing recruitment science. Then I'll really get into the social media recruitment for research studies, and we'll go through some of the UF or the updates to the UF guidelines for recruiting participants to studies via social media, which will include a step-by-step of not only what information to include in your IRB submission, but what that looks like and how it translates into the SMART form as well. So a little bit about our recruitment center team. We have a few co-directors with specialization and expertise in a couple different areas. So Dr. Steve Anton, Dr. Linda Cutler, and Dr. Janice Krieger are our co-directors. As I mentioned, I am the recruitment center manager. We also have support. We have a lot of support from really outstanding people. I did not have images of everyone today, but I want to mention a few other people. Lihi Ortega, who's working as our recruitment specialist, Tiffany Pineda, who when it comes to everything IRB related, Tiffany is my go-to. Brian Severe, his support, he's in the Office of Clinical Research. So those are just a few other people to name that aren't pictured on here, but are very involved and supportive of our recruitment center team. So again, just helping to contextualize, where our approach to social media and recruitment, where it comes from. One of our overarching goals for our center is situated within the CTSI, which is part of the CTSA network across the US. And as part of this, our goals are to both advance the science and service of recruitment for study teams at the university, and really from a science perspective, advancing the science across the board on study recruitment. So that when I meet with teams and they say, hey, does this type of method for recruitment work? One of the reasons, it's good to advance the science, and it's an interest of many people on our team, but it also from a study team perspective, by actively working to advance recruitment science, we can provide accurate information and data to say, yes, this type of service will work for your team or work for your study, or no, this is probably not the best one for your project. So I've got this list of everybody on the side here. So I'm trying to move that over. All right, so a bit more about our recruitment services and science, or how our goals of advancing recruitment services, providing services and advancing the science. Some of our main services include providing consultations to study teams. These can be pre-IRB submission, post-IRB, pre-grant, post-grant award. The goal with the consultations is to, help study teams meet their recruitment and accrual goals. So whether that is, the planning stages are the easiest, I think, to help with, or can be the most the beneficial timing. But we also do meet with teams at various points across the study, the research process. So recruitment planning, plays into our consultations. It can be to something about social media specifically, which we'll talk more about. I'll talk a bit more about later. It can be study planning or recruitment planning for an entire project or grant. It really runs the gamut. We also provide recruitment communication support, which can look from a social media perspective, can be the development of campaign materials and evidence-based strategic messaging for social media and study recruitment. It can also be providing feedback on study flyers, other recruitment materials that, again, is evidence-based in an effort to increase recruitment and accrual to studies. Another type of service we provide are referrals to other cores and organizations on campus. So we recognize that we have a lot of resources here, but there are plenty of other resources that study teams could benefit from using for their recruitment. So just to name a few of the referrals, if you meet with us and you say, hey, I'm interested in using a national registry, we'd say, oh, great, we can help you get hooked up with Research Match. Or if you say, I'm looking at community or at recruiting members of the community in and around Gainesville, I particularly, with a particular focus on, underserved groups, we'd say, awesome, Health Street is a really great resource that you can use. And then I mentioned social media recruitment specifically because this is the talk that we're doing today. So that's another type of service. When it comes to advancing science, there are a couple different ways we do this as well, which can include support for grants and sponsored projects through letters of support, budgets, determining appropriate use of an application of recruitment resources for large projects. It also can include working with teams to develop, track, and evaluate recruitment outcomes, as well as recruitment message testing and evaluation. So those last two in particular are something that we've been working on extensively with our teams that we work with for study recruitment for our paid advertising campaigns, is to not only develop based messages and track them to see how successful they are online, both in terms of their reach, their clicks, their impressions. But one of our endeavors is to work with study teams to also set up mechanisms for tracking the data, so that when people say, hey, does this type of method work? We can say, well, we know what it does for recruitment and we know how successful the campaign could be. But one of the other really neat things about this, especially from a social media perspective, is when we do work with teams and we work with them early on, we are able to track and evaluate the accrual enrollment success as well. So just a few ways that we work on the recruitment science specific to social media. So I feel like I already went over this slide, but yeah, providing recruitment services, advancing science. I think I had that one in there twice. All right, so social media recruitment. I think this is probably one of the big reasons that people are here. They're looking to know what it looks like for study teams. So I put this together thinking about all the people that I've met with from a consultation perspective, talked with at different institutions about social media, and then my background in training and communication. And really, I think it boils down to if teams are interested in using social media recruitment, there are a couple key questions that we need to consider prior to developing materials, to starting a campaign. And it's, first and foremost is it actually an appropriate channel for recruiting participants to my study? One of the pervasiveness of social media, I think, has also become somewhat synonymous with it being like a cure-all for study recruitment. And it definitely works for some projects, but it does not work for all. So I'll talk a bit more about, what each of these things mean in a few minutes. But we really need to determine if it's an appropriate channel for recruitment. If it is, what strategy is best? There are a few different strategies we can use. Which sites and channels are appropriate for use, both from a team perspective and then also, or from a study perspective, but also institutionally. Which ones are permitted, and that reflects a little bit of the changes in our guidelines. And then the other steps are, what do I need to include about social media and recruitment in my IRB submission? And then this last step is about the process for submitting this. So teams are aware of what needs to be provided to IRB for review, just to help make that process as transparent as possible. So in terms of social media appropriateness, some of the key trends in or among adult social media users, you can see here that there's a huge increase in the number of social media, the percentage of social media users across or among adults in the US from almost over the last like 15, 20 years. So recent reports from the Pew data, it suggests that there's almost 75% of adults use at least one social media platform. I don't have this data in here, but I think it's 93 or 94% of adults use the internet. So whether it's social media or the internet, there's a good chance that the audience will be online. But I think one of the big things that comes into play when it is time to determine like recruitment appropriateness on social media really has specific channels and sites that are used for recruitment. So YouTube and Facebook are still the most popular sites that are used. There are more people who use YouTube, but Facebook leads in terms of frequency of use. So if you're like me, in my house, we have YouTube on once or twice a day in the morning when my daughter is getting ready to go to daycare, and then at the end of the day when we really need a break. But I would probably log into Facebook with a greater frequency than I would using YouTube. There are also noticeable age gaps and differences in cohorts across users on Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. So people who are less than 30 years of age, more likely to use those sites and with a greater frequency. So again, this is to say that there is 3 out of 4 adults have at least one type of social media account. So from a like, is the age of my audience online, and especially on social media in particular, more often than not, you're going to, yes, that is a trend that you'll see. But the types and the channels that people are using are a little bit different, and may not be appropriate for all, and definitely not appropriate for recruitment across all adult cohorts. So in terms of social media strategy, this is something, I just realized that bullet point is over one of those words, but I think we can figure it out. In terms of social media strategy, there are a couple different, I would say, types and considerations for social media recruitment. So as a study team, there are, I guess we boiled this down to, I think the easiest, most simple way to explain it is that there's organic and then there are paid options for recruitment. So if you have a project that you're interested in using social media for recruitment, it really boils down to, once we've determined, is the audience there? If they are, which sites are they using? Are you interested in using organic which is the free option, or paid, which is essentially not free activity to promote your study. So organic looks like posts, shares, likes. It's typically, or at least, we have it's more team led, I would say, from a resource perspective at this point. At UF, this is not to say that there aren't templates, resources and support for teams, but this is one where it's more, the team does at this point more of the work in getting the materials put together. CTSI Recruitment Center is certainly available for support and assistance, but it's more team led. It can be effective for building awareness, also used for partnerships, engagement opportunities, and recruitment. The paid option at this point really looks like advertising campaigns and I wrote boots, but it should say boosted ads. Again, it's not free. It involves some type of payment. For UF in particular, it involves a university approved social media account to be able to run any type of paid ads or sponsorship. The campaigns for recruitment in particular are created with specific objectives in mind, which typically have to do with, increasing clicks or traffic, driving people to a particular, a site after they see an ad. And one of the strengths of this is that there can be a greater potential reach for recruitment because you are essentially paying for a larger audience to see your recruitment content. So I'm going to talk I'll talk more about organic and paid options throughout the rest of the presentation, but really what it boils down to is, is it free or is it not free? Organic is really like posts, whereas paid is advertising campaigns. Those are just a few ways that we distinguish between the types and considerations for recruitment. So a few other things about social media strategies for recruitment. So again, is your audience online? That's an important first question. What, from an information perspective and content, what am I going to put on there, put on social media? But, as part of that, it's also important to consider, like, before you decide, okay, I should do free or organic, or I should do paid. It's really important to determine what the goals are of the project as well. So I know that most people here are probably interested in the recruitment aspect. So, goals would likely be recruitment to a single or a collection of studies where some type of data would be collected, not on the social media site itself, but through another part of the research process. But with any type of recruitment, but really what we've seen when it comes to social media is it's also important to understand the resources that are available for your individual team and the project. Because if you are interested in the paid out option, right, that requires a budget. And it does take quite a bit of time and resources to develop materials, even for some of the DIY, like the do-it-yourself options for recruitment. And then there is also like a managing component too that comes into play as well. So while social media, your audience might be available on social media and you've identified sites and you have potentially some budget, another important question is, do we have the team resources and support for this? And if we do, it's there are a few steps that we can take to help make sure that the recruitment is done effectively. So thinking back to the slide, a few back about posts versus advertising, this is really, they look very similar. It essentially boils down to where the ads or where the information is going online, and who's seeing it, how much content is being presented. So the one on would be my left, this one here. This would be an example of, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but where it says 835 people were reached with this particular post. This is an example of a free organic recruitment, study recruitment post that was placed on our, with IRB approval, was placed on our UF Studies Facebook page. And as you can see, there's a little bit of information about the project. There's an image that goes with it. And this is essentially one of the social media recruitment posts that was done, put together both by the team, and our recruitment specialists worked with them as well to develop the information. And then it was posted online, and over 800 people saw this particular post. The one here on my right, this one about the LGBTQ youth, this is one for an ad campaign that we recently ran. I took this screenshot in particular because this was the most effective ad, so essentially it reached the highest number of people who were between the ages of 13 and 17. We ran this on Instagram and Facebook, or through Facebook on Instagram. And this is an example of a paid advertising campaign. So the potential for the paid campaigns is much, but like I said, there is a cost that comes with it. So they look similar, again, from a recruitment content perspective. There's information about the project, target audience, a call to action. It's just the difference. One of the main differences is that one is a post, one is an advertisement. The post was free, advertisement is what was the non-free option. So I'm gonna have to move this thing down a bit for me. All right. So if you're considering social media for recruitment to a study, this is essentially the information that you would need to include, teams would need to include for their IRB submission. And so if it's organic, again, the free option, whether it's posting it to I just realized both of my examples were for Facebook and Instagram, but whether or not it's for Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or Reddit, from a free perspective, the organic teams would need to include a list of the social media sites, groups, the pages, accounts, or subreddits that they're interested in targeting for recruitment, the content of the social media post, as well as a message to the social media moderators or account owners indicating or asking, requesting that they post information about their study on their page. So Lauren, feel free to jump in here. I know we talked about this last week, but one of the main reasons that we have study teams message social media moderators and account owners and ask them to request or ask them to post information on behalf of the study team is that, two reasons. One, from a credibility perspective, if somebody who is already, an owner of an account or is the moderator of a group, they already have an established credibility and rapport with the group members. We do not want people joining groups or posting information to groups that they're a part of for recruitment. That's not allowed. But by putting together a message requesting that social media moderators and account owners do it on the study team's behalf, it serves both the need of it meets both the credibility perspective. So, it's coming from somebody that the group or people who follow the account already know. But my other understanding of it is that it would be in violation of the cold call policy for recruitment.
So with the social media posting, a lot of it is just making sure that we have permission from whoever is managing, and this kind of goes more broadly, but if you have email lists or something like a Facebook group, we just want to make sure we have permission from whoever is moderating it and running it, so that you don't just walk into someone's group and essentially start, talking about your study. So it's a general sort of respect thing. There are different groups and different policies that places will have. So we just want, it's generally a respect thing and making sure that we have, that we're engaging with communities in a polite and productive way.
Thanks. So again, with the organic or free options, the other, you'll need to include like a link or description of where the post content will direct users. So if there's an online website or if there's a red cap survey or screener, you'll need to include that in your submission as well. As well as your process and planned responses for moderators or group owners to provide to prospective participants. So it's similar to, if you think about it from the offline perspective on recruitment, just as you would submit a recruitment script or an email script, if you're going to send an email asking people to participate, and then if their instructions are to call the study team, if they're interested, or to learn more information, you would submit a copy of your phone script. It's the same process for social media. You would submit the content of your posts like you would the content of your flyers. You would submit your scripts that you're gonna send to participants, or in this case to page owners, moderators. And then you're also gonna provide your script of your planned responses that you're gonna provide to the moderators or account owners to provide to people who may comment or inquire about the study. So that like online, that social media to like the standard offline comparison is something I find super helpful. And I've heard many over the years. So it is something.
The way we generally put it is if participants are going to see it, we just want to take a look at it and make sure that everything follows the different guidelines and policies and procedures.
Yep. So I have two different, I think what are those columns? Yeah. For the paid advertising for recruitment, they're the same when it comes to the first four. The only, submitted. I'm not sure. I think someone's talking. They need to mute. Thanks. Wasn't sure if that was a question at first. So if you're using a type of paid, if you're interested in a type of paid advertising campaign, again, the sites that are being used need to be listed. Again, one of the changes to the recent guidelines is that in the policy, in the social media guidelines, is that teams are permitted to use social media recruitment or social media sites for recruitment across the board. It's not an IRB thing. It's that there's no, there aren't restrictions on the sites that can be used for social media. So if teams are interested in using Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, LinkedIn, Twitter, those are the first 4 or 5 that come to mind, they are permitted. Again, it's just the information that is going to be used in recruitment has to be provided. So when I say a university approved account for advertising, it's the same. It applies in a way that that is similar to like our UF Studies Facebook account, in that if you're using an approved account for paid advertising for recruitment, you need to indicate which sites are used, targeting criteria, if applicable, content of social media, advertising, which teams that work with us through our UF CTSI Recruitment Center, we will develop these materials for the team, which will include all the content of advertising and a description of where the post or ad content will direct users. If it's not through our UF Studies account, additional things that need to be included in the recruitment are process and planned responses that the team will provide to participants, and then information on the personnel charged with monitoring and responding to campaign comments, questions, inquiries. So I mentioned support services a couple times along the way. and also determine whether or not social media is even an appropriate option for teams. And so one of the things I want to highlight is that through our center, our recruitment center, we offer social media recruitment services. This is a screenshot of part of the landing page right now, but I also included the link at the bottom. So if teams are interested in using social media recruitment and they would like to do it, we have templates that are on the site as well. You can request a consultation for additional support. And then there is also a link to review some of our UF Studies Facebook, some of the posts on our UF Studies Facebook page too, so you can get a sense of how different study teams and different projects have recruited organically the free way for their studies. So when it comes to steps to submitting your study for social media recruitment, I worked with Lauren on this to develop or to put together some slides for what it looks like from if we're a study team or if I'm a coordinator or a researcher who wants to use social media. I have my plan developed. I know the content that I want to use, but where does it all go in my IRB? And so the smart form itself in my IRB, one of the first places, I just realized, and I can't see the top right now. One of the first places, that you'll indicate, or one of the first parts where you need to, select for audience is your general population via advertisement. So if you're a team and you're interested in using social media for recruitment, this particular page comes up underneath the recruitment methods, and you'd select the general population via advertising. Also on this page, you'd provide information to describe who's going to recruit the participants, and then how people will be identified and recruited. I made a point to boldface the organic, the paid through the UF Studies account and paid through the UF other approved accounts. I don't think that those things are necessary in there. I just wanted to make a point that there are 3 different ways that you could write up how will people be identified and recruited based on those 3 previous recruitment columns that I presented a few slides back. And so it would be indicating that if it's organic, that they'll be recruited through posts. If it's a paid account or if it's paid advertising, people will be recruited through the paid advertisements on which sites and through which university approved account. So I gave the example for if you're using our UF Studies Facebook account, or if you're using other UF approved accounts. And again, this is underneath the recruitment methods. Then at the bottom of this page, you would select advertising and social media recruitment as well. So once you complete that information, I think it's technically right above on here, you would also select these items in there to make sure that it's reviewed appropriately. Another thing that you would need to select if you're using our CTSI social media services. So if you're interested in using the paid advertising campaign option through our center, this one's earlier on, but since it's an if, and not everybody would need to select it if you're not using the CTSI services, underneath the requested review type, which I believe occurs, maybe it's the 3rd or 4th page in the IRB, you would select yes to using the services if you're interested in using the social media recruitment services. And then the last page, what this looks like is, this is near the end, but the CTSI ancillary would be, if you are interested in using the social media services, you would select any of our services. You mentioned social media specifically, since that's what we're talking about today, but you would select the Recruitment Assistance option as well. So a couple of takeaways or just a few things I want to highlight is that at this point, there's no restrictions on the social media sites that are available for use in study recruitment, which is a change to our guidelines. Change was implemented in December of 2021. Some of this next thing, this has been and always will remain that study recruitment materials must be submitted and approved by IRB prior to use. Comes to social media recruitment, IRB is responsible for reviewing the content of the materials. So it's the information that's being provided. That is what that's the role of the IRB in all this. And so when uploading the materials and the information, it's important that or into the smart form that teams indicate where each recruitment document will be used, which can be done through appropriate labeling. So see attachment, I think I gave a few, I didn't point those out, but I gave a few examples of that on one of the in the smart form slides. For social media, we need to upload all materials, but including social media, materials need to be uploaded exactly as they'll be presented to participants. So if you're using multiple methods for recruitment, such as flyers and emails and social media posts or advertising, it's not appropriate to say that we'll edit the message. You need to include the physical, like actual copies of what people will see on social media, just like you would for the flyer. And if there's, you're intending to change the size or image of the recruitment materials for social media, the mock-ups need to be included for review and approval. And then all of the recruitment materials must meet the university and IRB advertising requirements. Just realized I didn't include the link to that, but I'll add it before we post the slides online. And then one of the other big things I wanted to highlight was that there are institutional resources available to support study recruitment. Social media in particular, we work with a lot of teams on social media recruitment. And so if teams are interested in using it, they're not sure if they should use the organic or the paid, or they're uncertain about the person power or really how to get going with it. We do offer recruitment consultations to study teams. I'll make sure this link is live too before we, or this is, you can just click on it before I convert the slides and send them over for posting. But there is the option for teams to meet with us if they're looking for assistance, whether it's, we're struggling to recruit, we have a new study, we're working on a grant submission, we want to use social media, we just need to know more about it. We are absolutely here to help. And then I want to, this is a really small thing here. It's this one up here, the social media recruitment in particular. We do also, from a support perspective, we have templates on our site that break down, that essentially spell out and break down what teams need to include for social media recruitment. They're not required to use the templates, but they are there and they are available to help make the process easier for both the teams that are interested in using it, and then also to help streamline review for IRB. And that is the end of my presentation. So thanks for listening. And if I didn't see any, I don't think I saw any questions come through in the chat, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them now. And I already conferred with Lauren about this. If there's anything directly related to IRB, she's going to jump in and handle those.
Yeah.
So,
thank you so much for talking to us today. So what questions do we have? Any questions about social media recruitment?
you can type them into the chat, or I'll do my best to look and see if there are any hands that come up on the.
Do we have anything?
I was going to say, I don't think I've ever given a presentation where on this where I haven't had questions.
I'll ask the question.
Hi, Janice.
Hi. What do you see as, being the biggest challenge to recruitment, and what's one way people can, better prepare or improve the way they think about or plan for recruitment?
Are you talking generally or with social media in particular?
Maybe I'll refine the question to say social media in general, or social media in particular.
Okay, so I could have answered it both ways. So I'll start with, I think one of the biggest challenges that I encounter when working with study teams is that they've underestimated the amount of time it's going to take for recruitment. So they need to get 100 participants, and participation involves, 3 weeks, a total of 3 weeks of time, and people plan for a few months when in reality it's going to take 2 to 3 times that amount of time, that length of time to identify and recruit participants. So I would say length of time is one of the biggest, I don't want to call it an oversight, but it's just something that I see regularly where people are like, oh, we thought we could get everybody into the study in 6 months. And here we are 9 months later and we're still missing half. So time estimates. And then from a social media perspective, I think there's 2 things. One of is that sometimes I've seen many teams. So okay, let me backtrack here. There's a really high proportion of, or significant proportion of adults who use media and who are online in general. So from an audience perspective, is my audience online? Is my audience on social media? More often than not, we can say yes, at least, there are certain features or preferences of your audience, like that, that people in your audience, will meet and they will be online. But just because they're online doesn't mean that they are going to engage the study. And then the other, so it was the, interest, like they may be there, but it may not be in a high enough number to show engagement or interest in the study. So again, that's not necessarily a limitation, because I always recommend that teams, you cast a wide net when it comes to recruitment. You multiple resources, from the beginning for recruitment. But they tend to think it's going to be a cure-all for recruitment and that it's going to work. And then the other part is that, especially, more from the, if teams are interested in recruiting through some of the free or organic options, it still does involve a time commitment. And so regardless of whether it's the campaigns or the organic, it involves more. It's similar to posting a flyer on a telephone pole. I've heard Dr. IRB say that many times. I'm using that example. It's like, if it's going on a telephone pole, that's great. It's more, it takes more time than that with social media. And I think that, so from a timing perspective, it's underestimated. Teams are underestimating the length of time they're going to need to meet their recruitment and accrual goals in general. And then also from a social media in particular, the length of time that they're going to need to commit to really being responsive to prospective participants. Long-winded answer, but.
Well, thank you. So just real quick, yeah.
I've got a kind of a general question. So if we've had social media IRB approved when we started our research study a couple of years ago, and we used the social media platform, and then we kind of got away from it, do we have to get another IRB approval if we want to use that same materials and try and start it up again to see maybe if we could get a different crowd per se? if that makes sense.
So you mean the same materials on different sites or on the same site?
On the same site. We used Facebook a couple of years ago with the help of CTSI for a particular study. And it didn't yield very much at first, but we were trying to see maybe if we could revisit that now that more people are using it. And we wanted to use the same materials, but we didn't know, do we have to get it reapproved or just contact CTSI for
So
help?
if you're going to be making, like, if there's any changes that would be made, even if it's something like you're updating the contact person who's going to be on the social media post, or updating the time frame, you're recruiting through April through July of this year. If it's something like that, that would require a revision to your submission in IRB.
Okay.
It would be a fairly minor revision. You would just need to revise the materials to make sure that they match exactly what's going to be posted. If there's no changes at all to any of your materials though, and it's the same sites and you're basically doing the same exact thing, that's like running off additional flyers and reposting. You don't need to submit for that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I can add one thing to that from a CTSI Recruitment Center perspective. If they're, again, this is without knowing the full context of the study. If it involves an advertising campaign, like a paid advertising campaign in particular, there have been significant changes to the policies regarding paid campaigns on Facebook. So prior to, like if it was a paid campaign, we would need to meet prior to,
Okay.
prior to submitting your protocol to be on the safe side. If it's a post and if you're just saying, hey, would you mind, reposting this on the page, content changes, that would be, like Lauren said, we wouldn't need to meet about that. You could email us about that.
Okay.
But, yeah.
So we got a question in the chat.
Yeah.
So this is, so noticing after social media recruitment, getting bots filling out surveys. So do you have any tips on how to avoid this?
I do. So a couple of different strategies or different recommendations. One is that in screeners, if there's a screener, and if there isn't a screener, I would include a screener. And I would, in the screener, multiple questions, but avoid excessive use of yes, no options. So, because in my, and from what I've heard back anecdotally from teams is that, they're like, well, I had 3 or 4 questions. They were all yes, no. And then I had so many bots. And it's like, those are pretty easy to get around. So it would use more than just yes, no questions. That would be my first recommendation. If there is a way if you're looking for people of a certain age, or, you could ask them to type in their birthday. If you're looking for people from a certain county, you could include a full list of counties in the state of Florida and ask people to select from a drop down and include in there an option that says my county is not listed. And then if people select that, or bots or whoever, if they select that one, then they're not eligible. And they are automatically, taken to a separate page of their screener that says, thanks so much for your interest. You're not eligible for the study. It could also be asking the same question twice. So it could be a yes, no question that you're asking. Are you 18? Yes. But then, like I said, later on, having them either select from a drop down the year that they were born, and then writing out how, or typing out how or the date of their birth. So it's essentially they're confirming it in a couple different ways. Those options I've used personally in study recruitment, and for a paid advertising campaign, and it was a unique study. It wasn't unique. You had to be a parent and you had to live in a certain county. There were a few other restrictions, but I want to say that I screened out about 50% of people, and those recommendations I've also provided to other teams who are actively recruiting on campaigns now. And they haven't seen the issue with bots that other teams have seen. So those would be my recs. Yeah, I hope that helped.
Yeah. All right. So we've got time for maybe one more question. Does anybody else have something they want to ask about social media recruitment? All right, well, if we don't have anything else, thank you so much, Dr. Flood-Grady, for coming and talking to us. We really appreciate it. This was super helpful. So we will be posting this online, and we'll have a link available to it in the next newsletter as well. So if you missed it here, you can always catch us there. And I hope everybody has a really great rest of your day. So, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye.